that $420,000 would pay for the entire education of like 3 or 4 children, or we could spend it incarcerating one kid.
Welcome back to State Reppin', a one-time radio show and now podcast where we find out what politics is like at the Capitol of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, from the perspective of our 2 co-hosts, state representatives, Darren Madison and Ryan Clancy. How are you 2? From your social media, it looks like you've been busy since the last time we talked.
Busy and tired and fired up.
Indeed.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about today is we'll start off with a little bit of pop culture. Ryan got shouted out in Sean Hannity's book I just saw the other day. How did that feel?
Oh, wow. So that was, it was an older book, and it was for something that I did a little bit over 20 years now. I went to Iraq as a human shield to try to either stop the 2003 invasion of Iraq or to make sure that their infrastructure wasn't destroyed. Like it was the first time we invaded, and conservatives had all sorts of feelings about that. Also, by the way, I was right. The many folks who said that it was wrong to invade that country were right. And boy, it led to 600,000 or 700,000 dead people and counting.
Yeah, and Sean Hannity had this to write about you. Despite having been misled by Iraq, some of the human shields remain unrepentant and continue to impugn, not quite sure what that word means, America's motives. Ryan Clancy of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, said he had no regrets.
Yeah, I think unrepentant is probably a good name for my biography. That sounds great. And it is. I think, I don't want to get too far off track here, but I think it does tie into knowing when to do the right thing and knowing, that we should be looking at data. And then also not glossing over the fact that our leaders at the time went along with some really terrible decisions. And looking back at the horrific results of that, we should make sure that our decisions today and in the future are based on it being the right thing to do and not shallow political calculations.
And all of those lessons were learned. Let me paint you this picture of Ryan in Sean Hannity's book. No, actually, this is in the newspaper. This is Ryan, 20 years younger, bandana. I think it was long hair.
It was purple.
You looked good.
Thanks.
And then what is it called again?
It was a soul patch. And I was the only, myself and Tupac were the only folks to be allowed to have our bandanas on in our Wall Street Journal line drawing pictures. So it was a great honor 2 decades ago.
Who was the second person?
Tupac.
Okay.
That's a great fun fact.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Your grandkids are going to be impressed.
I hope my grandkids know who Tupac is. We'll make sure they do.
I hope so too.
Are you saying Tupac?
Tupac.
Yeah. Tupac.
Well, Tupac is like the Wish version of Tupac. Like,
I wish I had a
That's
Tupac.
hilarious.
It was just 2 beers. Yeah.
Okay, I'm here for it.
And Darren, you were just in Selma, Alabama for the 58th anniversary of Bloody Sunday.
Yes.
How was that? What'd you take away?
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing opportunity to be in a space where I got to take in a legacy of a movement and see a community that's still left behind as you look at the rest of the country, and folks still have the tenacity to continue to push on and fight for everything that they deserve in a state that actually wants to really ensure that they don't get anything that they need, right? I connected with residents that had been doing organizing for a long time. Some of those foot soldiers who walked across that bridge on that Sunday, and some of the young people who are doing some amazing work today, both in Selma and from around the country.
What does a continued movement look like? Is that community groups being very engaged and very active?
Yeah, so the continued movement looks like the community fighting for access to their fair share of resources, similar to the Selma of the North, Milwaukee, fighting for its share,
I had never heard
fair
that
share of
before.
resources, and also, ensuring that they have the opportunity to recover because they got hit by, I believe, they got hit by a.
Is it a tornado?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. And they still are recovering. The president made some commitments. Hopefully he honors those as it relates to ensuring that someone gets what it needs to not only survive, but to thrive. Because I'd hate to see a city like that still left behind 20 years from now. Or, something that has, this city that has a staunch legacy of fighting for something that has benefited all communities of color throughout the United States, turned it to something that's glorified by white folks.
New York Times, media, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those pesky white folks. I'm going to cut that out. That was not good. Going.
Oh man, please cut that out.
If you got that out, we gotta redo me saying Tupac the right way. No, I'll leave that in. That was funny.
That was very funny. Okay, so taking it back to what this show is actually about, what's going on at the Capitol in Madison. On Tuesday, Republicans passed some tough on crime bills. Can you walk us through those and what those were?
First of all, when you say tough on crime, you have to do air quotes, and that may not come through in the
That's so funny.
in the radio thing, because they are not tough on crime. What they are is tough on people, and in fact, many of these things will increase incarceration, but also increase crime, and they are so punitive and so ridiculous. But go on.
No, that was basically it. And I was going to quote one of your press releases where you were talking about research needing to be done, and then the Republicans, there was supposed to be some promised data that they were supposed to give to back up the claims that this was going to help decrease crime.
Yeah. So in committee, I think it was Senator Chris Larson, who I'm a big fan of, asked the authors specifically of this cash bail bill, the bill that would expand both cash bail and therefore mass incarceration. What evidence do you have that this will increase public safety? And they said, well, we don't have any, but we will find some and get it to you. And it really underlines the idea that this is hollow messaging, but that the effects of this are very real if it passes, and that the authors of this are not actually trying to reduce crime. They're trying to play to a base that they imagine will be swayed by arguments that are not based in data.
That's what I was going to say. Where do they come up with these ideas if they're not supported by data, or no one's ever done a pilot program and they've watched it decrease crime?
Some of it is like ALEC, right? So there are organizations out there who feed them these ideas, and they look to regressive, terrible legislation in other states, kind of see how it's playing. But it is frustrating. I think, we try to couch our legislation and base our legislation in the experiences of people and data, and these are not that.
True. I mean, a lot of times they, like Ryan was saying, they copy and paste legislation that has been used in other states.
Yeah, can we take
to
a
the
second?
point that, it literally doesn't line up with state statutes, and it's up to the LRB to actually go in and say, "Oh, well, we got to fix this to make it work."
This law says Pennsylvania, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, just cross that out and write Wisconsin. It's fine."
Yeah, I was going to say, can we linger for a second on this ALEC? I just learned about them a couple of years ago, and it really is like a huge think tank that feeds same legislation to 50 different states.
Yes, but you also have to put think in quotes because there's not a whole lot of thinking going on, at least in terms of if these policies will be good for people. And it is frustrating. So it's a big... it's a really well-funded, very conservative organization.
Do you know
they
who
get
funds
together
them?
every year, right? And conservative folks get together, and they receive their marching orders, and they get folders full of legislation, which they bring back to their home states and try to peddle. And it is frustrating.
True. And this legislation's totally written out exactly how you would just submit it into
Oh
it.
yeah, it's
with the wrong name, Pennsylvania,
yeah, exactly.
instead of Wisconsin.
It's like taking somebody else's work, but that other person is giving it to you. And you have I guess a political motivation to pass it, and they'll tweak with it sometimes. They'll put in, some story that they heard or fabricated from within their own district to justify it. But it is incredibly cynical way to push legislation. And again, it really ignores both the data and the needs of people and the massive harm that a lot of those pieces of legislation will cause if they're passed into law.
Yeah. And so backing up again, what does these actual bills or legislation do to increase the cash bail pretrial detention?
Yeah, so not very long ago, the Republicans authored legislation that would put two items on our April 4th ballot. They realized at some point that if you pass legislation that's bad enough, the governor, Tony Evers, will veto it, hopefully. And that but if you pass a constitutional amendment, you can in two successive sessions, it goes onto the ballot. And then the people of Wisconsin can vote it up or down, essentially, and the governor doesn't get a veto. And in this case, it amends the state constitution permanently until we can unwind that.
Forever.
In this case, on April 4th, there will be two questions on the ballot. One of them deals with the definition of serious harm. The other one deals with the definition of violent crime. But when those were put on the ballot, when the Assembly voted for it, and the Senate voted for it, those definitions did not exist, right? So the Republicans were like, we don't want to use serious bodily harm. We're going to change to serious harm. And we're going to redefine or try to define what violent crime is. So they were put on the ballot, and then the Republicans were like, oh, guess what? Everything is serious harm and everything is violent crime. So the Republican definition of serious harm includes everything. It includes emotional distress. And their definition of violent crime is not just rape or murder or the worst of the worst they talked about in committee. It is just about every crime, including accusing somebody of a crime in a way which imperils their profits, including intentionally watching a cockfight or tampering with household materials. It is ridiculous, and it would be funny if the effect of it wouldn't be mass incarceration, because what we're talking about with these definitions is these are the things that judges are now, or will be, if it passes on April 4th, expected to use as criteria to incarcerate people pre-trial. So while they are innocent, merely the charge of this would be enough to lock them away. And we know how disastrous the idea of pretrial incarceration is.
And what do they do now?
Right now, it's
how the judges decide.
It depends on where you are.
Yeah, it's very much more open to debate. Judges should not actually be looking at much of anything. The current system is bad
because it's the judges that actually decide these sentences right now, right?
Yeah, and 8 different counties across Wisconsin have something called a risk assessment tool. That is helpful for some judges, but it's still within the context of a larger cash bail system. Our current system is terrible. But rather than replacing it, which we are doing, we are proposing legislation to do just that. The Republicans want to double down on the idea of cash bail and expand it and massively incarcerate people, not based on if they're a risk to the community, but if they have the money in their pocket to get out. So the short version of this is, if you are one of the, I would argue, very few people that should be separated, before your trial from the public. And
what are you defining that as? I mean, is that rape and murder?
So it depends, right? And what a risk assessment tool would do would be that it would look at the totality of the circumstances, right? It's not just saying that there's one charge, but yeah, more serious charges would generally get somebody removed from society, and that just makes sense. But we'd be looking at that holistic risk assessment rather than the idea of cash bail. If you are so dangerous that you need to be removed from society, no amount of money should make that go away. And if you're not, then you should be free to participate in your own defense. And in fact, the data says that if we sever people from their communities and their support systems and their loved ones pre-trial, it means that they're more likely to be rearrested in the future. So what this would do, doubling down on cash bail, is to likely increase crime rather than decreasing it. And that's why it's so ridiculous.
So imagine this, right? Let's use Ryan as an example. Imagine Ryan, does something, and that thing causes $2,500 and damages, right? For a business, right?
Graffiti artist. That's
sure.
Ryan.
Or let's not even say that he did it. Let's say that he was in this case scenario. Ryan was innocent. He saw that happen, that happening, but he was the closest person to the scene when folks arrived, and he got arrested.
I'm not going to narc on my friends.
He's not a snitch, apparently. Weak.
Apparently, I'm not a snitch. Come here and say that. No, wait, that's a threat.
Oh,
I think you'd lock me up pre-trial.
Right. So Ryan gets arrested. He appears before a judge, and they say, based off, the constitutional amendment, we are now going to hold you, for, a bail of $100,000 for that situation, which they could do. Ryan then can't pick up Fiona from school. Can't pick up Seb, both of his young people. He can't show up for work. If he has some bills that are due, he can't pay those bills. And say if he's there for 3 months, 6 months, right? Because we know that our courts are backlogged, right? Mm-hmm. He's there for that amount of time. What happens to his family? Right? Where does his young people go? What happens to the bills he wasn't able to pay? What happens to his home? And then he's found innocent.
I know.
And he has to come back to the world with nothing.
That just blew up in his face.
Yep.
His whole world just got blown up.
Right.
So as you think about folks who, have to navigate this situation, or will have to navigate this situation with the potential passing of this constitutional bail amendment, it's going to create a huge amount of harm for a lot of families that are already struggling. And they don't have the support systems that they need to even lean on someone to reclaim their lives. So yes, it would drastically increase recidivism, and it will drastically disproportionately affect communities of color and other marginalized communities. So this is why it's so bad.
And that's almost a best case scenario under the expansion, right? So in this scenario, I'm found innocent because I was able to stick it out. I was able to sit in jail for 6 months or 9 months or whatever it is, because we know how backed up the jails and the courts are right now. With this doubling down, it's going to get even worse. And there is no way that Milwaukee County specifically is going to be able to withstand this. So you talk to public defenders, you talk to DAs, you talk to the corrections officers in our jails, you talk to every single part of the system. They're like, no, we are at the breaking point. We can't take anymore. We can't hire COs. We can't pay them. Regardless of where you fall on this is terrible for the whole system, but especially for the people in it. So what often happens, and the stakeholders that we've both talked to recently, they said, I was held pre-trial and I was innocent. But because I was in there for so long awaiting trial, I had to plead out. That was the only way that I could get out. And that's not in anybody's best interest to have innocent people pleading guilty because of the conditions that are in, that are in our jails and our prisons right now. And we're only going to make all of that worse by doubling down on this terrible system.
No, and like Darren said, those are fathers and mothers and part of whole systems.
And sometimes our young people, because young people are currently being waved into the adult system all the time.
Right. Are they really? Is that like 16-year-olds?
Yeah. Younger than that sometimes.
Right. And there's legislation, in our states as well as others that's trying to up that age, right? To get it up to 18, because you should not be, considered an adult until you're an adult.
I thought that was the definition, yeah.
Yeah, no, right. No. It's the definition if you want to, buy cigarettes or fight in a war. But we'll certainly put you in jail, in the adult system.
And some
damaging enough.
And some states have moved to even look at, bringing young people as old as 24 down to the youth system, understanding that the development of young people's brains, young males, goes up to 24, and same for other folks on the spectrum of gender identity. But that's a longer term fight. In our state, 17-year-olds are still going into the system. They are trying to, we had a really sad case where a young person who either was he 13 or 11?
Oh, I don't know.
It was a young person who was under the age of 14 who folks were trying to wave into the adult system, which makes no sense.
Right. Any idea what that's like for a young person to be put in an adult prison? I mean, I'm
So they wouldn't go directly. I'm so sorry. Let me correct it. They're given, so they're still placed into, if depending on how young they are, they're still placed into the juvenile system, and then they're transitioned at a certain period in time. Sometimes with older young people, so 16, 17, they're transferred directly into the adult system. It's horrible, right? You're not in the space with people that, are near your age.
These are grown men.
These are grown men.
You're 16
right?
years old.
Who, if you want to, even if you want to use, the definition that Republicans use about all the folks in that space, which we know isn't true, right? Some folks but we know that some folks who have committed some of the most heinous crimes on that space, you're putting kids in that space. Right. And that's it's a recipe for disaster. Mm-hmm. And we know that all of our prisons and all of our jails are understaffed at the county level and at the state level, right?
They're understaffed for the number of people that we incarcerate.
Correct.
They're staffed just right if we incarcerate fewer people. They're overstaffed if we incarcerate the number of people that we should.
I think you should go deeper into that distinction, Ryan.
Yeah, so this is something that I hear all the time at the county and at the state. It's we're understaffed. We're understaffed. We don't have enough COs. We don't have enough whatever else. The easiest and the most obvious solution to that is to incarcerate fewer people. We don't have a lack of correction officers. We have a lack of capacity for the massive amount of people that we're putting away, and I probably get annoying when I correct people in committee frequently that there are two ways to look at this, and I frequently refer to ratios between people that we incarcerate and people that are tasked with meeting their needs, and just those raw numbers. So.
True.
When do you feel like you have to stand up and give that other perspective, the other side of the coin?
Well, we just have to do it in our corrections committee.
Yeah.
There was an ask for $12 increase in
$12 an hour.
$12 an hour increase, right? For correctional officers at the state level. And when breaking down the metrics, the chair of our committee broke down the metrics, and he was like, $1 equates to 50 million statewide. So if you got viewers, you can do the math, right? 12 times
60.
50,
60 million, yeah.
Exactly, right? So as we talk about
600.
There you go. $600 million in an increase in staff positions that we can't even fill.
And it feels like everybody's trying to cut jobs at the city level. And then we're trying to add...
there's always money available. And
for corrections.
And that committee was fascinating to me because the Republicans and the Democrats were both falling over themselves to provide this additional money. The problem wasn't in their narrow frame if the money should be provided. It's who's going to get the credit for it. So the Republicans were like, oh, it's in the governor's budget. We can't let this pass. Not that they don't want more money to go to it. They just wanted to,
politics.
Have a different number. At no point was anybody talking about the reason that we're talking
high.
About paying, I mean, the $12, or should it be less, or should it be more? But the real reason that we were paying so much money, and at this point, we're paying more money into the Department of Corrections than we are UW, the whole UW system.
True.
That is not sustainable. It's not right. I can think of many academic positions and many other positions that would be well deserving of another $12 an hour. But the fact that we're framing it so narrowly and assuming that we should keep throwing money into this system, which is providing so much harm and damage to people and communities, is frustrating to me.
Yeah. We can't, it all comes down to the fact that we can't incarcerate our way out of root causes of crime. All of these bills that were brought up this past Tuesday, a bunch of the fights that we've been having in the Capitol have been rooted in incarcerating our way out of crime. Folks have tried that.
Since the 70s.
Folks have tried that
since forever.
Since the 70s. Since forever. You're right.
Yeah.
Since forever.
You know.
I mean, if you at some point, I'd love to just spend a whole state repping episode talking about the history of youth incarceration, because it's super interesting, and it starts with the Puritans who thought that children had the devil in them and had to work that out. And then we figured out child labor laws, but to prevent that from happening. But then we went to incarcerating them. I mean, if we think about even the adult correctional system, what if we spent the huge amount of resources that we currently spend in incarcerating folks in front-end diversions, rehabilitation, and also really making some firm investments in our city and our state's infrastructure and living wage jobs. I mean, all of those things are deterrents for our communities, you know, for folks who are currently committing crimes. But no one's talking about that and putting that first. They're putting it last, and they're cutting from the resources that communities need to thrive to make this back end investment that doesn't make sense and only forces folks deeper into a system of harm.
Yeah, the prison industrial complex is why we can't have nice things. So, Will, I have some quick trivia here. How much does it? Because next week, Taryn and I are going to visit Lincoln Hills and Copper Lake, so the child prison up in northern Wisconsin. How much does it cost to incarcerate one child for 1 year at Lincoln Hills, Copper Lake?
I hate to even
First
guess.
episode. It was on the first episode.
Oh my gosh, was it?
It was.
I was going to say, this sounds familiar.
It's either on the first episode or I've brought it up dang near
It's the one
every
with
time
Raisha.
Uh-huh.
So let's see, Will, if you listen to your own podcast.
I was going to say, did I edit it 3 times? $40,000.
$420,000 per child per year. There are few things that we could use that for that would not help a child or a family not be in that place in the first place.
Can you imagine if you spent $400,000 on that kid and his life and tried to make them
Right. I mean,
thrive?
it's unbelievable. You could provide services for a child's entire life for that sum of money, and yet we don't bat an eye at that. And we're talking about how to feed that system more rather than why we keep feeding that system and what we're giving up to feed that system.
How much money do we... Trivia question number 2. How much money do we spend to educate a young person? Let's say, and it varies. But let's say at the top of the charts, right? Of school districts. That district happens to be in my district.
What school is that?
That's the Glendale School District spends the most per pupil in our state, and that's mainly through RFPs that they've done. Other areas in the state have been trying to get there. The biggest solution is in voter investments in education. But that's besides the point.
Yes, back to the trivia.
Back to the question at hand. How much do you think we spend per young person annually in terms of investments in their education?
I can't decide if I want to guess a high number and that'd be good or a low number and it'd be cheaper. I'm going to guess $40,000 again.
I wish.
More than that.
Is it more?
No, it's not.
It is.
Per pupil?
Per pupil.
Per pupil dollars.
Per pupil dollars.
You
roughly,
sure?
Yeah, it depends on the district, but you're looking at anywhere from 11 to 12,000 up to 16,000.
Correct.
Per pupil per
That's
year.
what I'm talking about.
Per
pupil
not 40,000
per
per year. I meant during the course of their academic.
Right. There you go.
I think I followed that.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. So you want to re-explain that the right way?
So that $420,000 would pay for the entire education of 3 or 4 children, or we could spend it incarcerating one kid, right? And then investing that in education, for instance, would mean lower class sizes. It would mean better experiences. It would mean mental health services. It would mean counseling.
It would mean teachers would enjoy their job again because they didn't have 40 kids to teach.
Exactly. As a former teacher, that would be lovely. And as a former teacher, my last year I had more than 40 kids in some of my classrooms. I was not a good teacher to those 44 kids, right? But I was pretty good when there was 25 kids in my class. We can fix some problems by throwing money at it. Incarceration is not one. right? We cannot fix crime by locking kids up. We can't fix crime by locking adults up. And yet we have done that and continue to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Folks want to help support not doing that. Is that voting no on these April 4th
April
ballot
4th,
measures?
there is going to be a bunch of candidates, depending on where you are in the state. And the first 2 questions, please vote no on. If either or both of those pass, we're looking at incarceration on a scale that we haven't seen before. And nobody knows what these questions really mean.
Yeah.
And people are not talking about that yet. I was just talking with an elected representative, who I won't name, who went into the went to go vote early and did not know what those meant. And was going to call me for a lifeline and say, what's actually the right way to vote on this? It's no on both of those. Holy shit, vote no on the first 2 questions on your ballot. Period.
That's funny. I was actually on a date 2 days ago, and she was asking me about the constitutional amendments. And I tried to explain it, and I thought I did all right. But I was just like, at the end of the day, vote no on these. Because the verbiage is so positive. She was like, even she said, I felt like I was getting tricked, and I knew that there was more to this because they sounded so positive. But she couldn't figure it out because there's no context with it.
Every piece of legislation that comes across our desk from the Republicans, it's like, wait, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I know this is bad, but I need to figure out some research to figure out exactly in what way this is going to cause harm to people. And we're usually right.
Or sometimes it's like, this sounds too good to be true.
Yeah.
And like,
Right.
sometimes it's actually a good piece of legislation, but and we're surprised by that, right? But we're like, nah, it can't be. So it's interesting to see how just the changing of one word can drastically transform a piece of legislation, and that decision can affect thousands of lives.
So if you're in Milwaukee County, though, and you're looking for a quick voting guide, there's going to be 4 questions on your ballot, more than likely. The first one is going to be harm, no on that. The second one is violence, no on that. The third one is ridiculous because the question is essentially, if you're an able-bodied adult, should you have to look for work in order to receive welfare benefits? You already do, so vote however you want on that, but also just vote no. The fourth one is the abortion referendum that I wrote at the county level. Please vote yes on that because bodily autonomy should not be something that the government is interfering with.
No. My mom. Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm.
And then you have a spectrum of elections.
Are there
do your
elections on there
research.
too? Are people running for
People
office?
are running
They want
for
to do
things.
this too?
They want to do it too for some reason.
have to
But
listen
yeah,
to the
folks
first
should
episode.
pay attention to those elections and do your research. I always want to remind folks to do their research on these candidates, so you
You
can
got a
make
good way to
informed
research.
decision.
I sometimes have a hard time, even with local elections. There just isn't that much coverage.
Yeah, I mean, local elections are harder. But I know when it comes to like state elections, when it comes to state elections, there's typically a bunch of national guides that actually end up coming out. And then typically the League of Women Voters in partnership with, I think it's 411.gov.org, produces a voting guide for a lot of elections. And that sometimes includes local elections. The other thing that you can do is just like go into your Google search bar and type in that name. And see what news articles come up. See if you can go to their website and take a deep dive.
Yeah. And
If you look at Ryan, you'll find so many interesting things about his time in Iraq.
I was going to say a lot of bandana pictures.
right. No, and disregard the banana pictures. Find
Banana
Did I say
pictures.
banana pictures?
You said banana.
Banana. Disregard banana or bandana or banana pictures and figure out what matters to you, right? So if you want to invest in actual public education, go to like the MTEA's endorsements. And, they have a whole process that will make pretty certain that the folks that get through that are going to actually support public education. It can be difficult to go to candidates' actual websites or social media feeds and
That's
see
what I
what
find.
the hell they're talking about because
It all sounds pretty nice.
yeah, it's like, oh, I'm in favor of transparency and listening to people, and it's like, well, are you? But like, figure out what you actually believe in, and then vote that way, and disregard all the fluff or banana pictures.
So taking a step back and looking at the Capitol again, I saw an article about senators and congresspeople deleting their public records. Did you guys keep up on that?
So yes, and in fact, we are part of the first term of folks. So all 8 of the Democratic Assembly folks who were new this term signed on to Chris Larson's legislation to compel folks at the state level to keep their records, just about every other responsible government unit does.
Gonna say, I thought freedom of records releases, and you pull those. And
Assembly is the only the Wisconsin State Assembly is the only government entity that has the ability to delete its own records.
They made
really
their
weird.
own rule. It's really bizarre, right? So everybody else, like, there are 2 things which mean that you should be able to. I mean, it's just the right thing to do. To like, when we set public policy, you should see what goes into that, right? You should see what that correspondence is. You should be able to see the whole process.
Transparency, yeah.
Yeah. So everybody can do an open records request, regardless of where you are, and that's usually as easy as contacting the person you want info from and saying, hey, like, I want to see the records on this specific thing or this specific term or whatever.
Oh, really?
Else,
you have
right?
to ask the specific person for them to give up their emails.
Yeah. And it's and most of us are the custodians of our own records. So at the county level, we keep stuff forever. There's like boxes and boxes of everything we ever do, and it's great, right? And it keeps us honest. That still applies at the state level for the assembly. When asked, we have to turn over all of our records, pertaining to that thing, unless they're protected by, lawyer privilege or something like that, or whatever else. And there's a whole process for that. However, at the assembly made its own rule saying that you can destroy records whenever you want. So if we destroy
People
records
can request
every day,
them, but...
right, you can request all you want, but that office only has to give you what they have in their possession at that time, and they can destroy it whenever they want. So the norm is to destroy records regularly. The training for our staff when they get to the assembly is just destroy all your emails.
Pretty much. They call them Fridays, if you know what I'm talking.
What made this come up in the first place for Chris?
So Chris authored this piece of legislation back in it was either 2011 or 2013. One of those 2 years.
A decade ago.
Yep. And I think it was with the transition of power, right? That happened around that time, and an active interest in seeking records from other offices. And they were just like, nope. We aren't gonna do that. I mean, I think the state Senate has to keep their records.
Yeah. So the Senate keeps theirs. This is just a special assembly rule that allows us to destroy all the evidence of what we do whenever we want, so as not to give it to the public. So, and the whole process here is like somebody, like Chris Larson has a really good idea for a piece of legislation and often introduces it time and time again. The Republicans don't even give it a hearing, right? Because in this case, that makes a ton of sense. If you're a Republican and you want to keep destroying your records that nobody can see what you're doing, you don't want to have a hearing because the public's going to be like, why on earth would you?
Hey, wait a minute.
How can you justify this? But by not giving something a hearing, they don't have to, right? They
Nobody
never have
ever
to hear
knows.
those questions from folks. It would be great if other folks, like constituents, the media, went to them and badgered them and said, what possible justification do you have for wanting to continue the practice of destroying public records to keep them out of the hands of the public? But we don't see that, right?
No.
Pretty much. So much for being servants of the people.
Right. And these are the same people,
Wisconsin idea.
Right. Yeah. And you go to their website, they're probably like, I'm running on, transparency and honesty and everything else. And then they get there and they're like, delete.
Transparent what? Honest what? Who honest? Not I.
I had something I forgot, dang it. Does anybody else do this? Any other states have this?
I don't think.
I looked a little bit. I haven't found any other.
I don't think any state. We also have some, and I don't know all of these because I've been studying up on the assembly rules. We also have some assembly rules that are exclusive to the Wisconsin State Assembly. There's most other states just exclusively use Robin ruls.
Oh, okay.
We're special.
We have our own special rules cocktail that only the Wisconsin Assembly gets to drink from. So
we have a whole thing called pairing.
Oh,
so
yeah.
If you want to vote, against a piece of legislation, but you don't want to be on the record voting against a piece of legislation, you can find somebody on the other side of the aisle who will pair with you, or somebody on your own side of the aisle who has a different opinion, and they will pair with you and cancel each other's votes out so that you're marked as being there, but you're sitting on the fence officially. It's super weird. Like I haven't found any other state that does that. You talk to other legislators and they're like pairing. Like, what are you Wisconsin people up to? That doesn't make any sense. Like, why wouldn't you want your vote to be public on something? But like, I don't even know how this stuff happens. Like,
yeah, and so I've been recently on an executive board. We started using Robert's rules, and you abstain on votes. And I got the feedback that you shouldn't abstain on votes when you're in leadership because you were elected to vote one way or another. You were elected to have an opinion, to make a decision. Do you guys, is that good feedback? Do you guys feel like that?
Because in most spaces that we occupy, when you abstain, it counts as a no vote, which is really dumb.
Is that because you're in the minority? So if you abstain, it just doesn't count? Or
it depends on whether you're in committee or on the main floor or anything else. This just came up at the county yesterday. We just passed legislation changing our chapter 1, which is like our kind of basic rules, to mean that if you abstain, it's actually an abstention. It's as if you weren't there.
Okay.
But prior to that, prior to whenever the county exec signed this into law, an abstention counts as a no vote at the county. At the state, it's a weird like mishmash of either it counts as an actual abstention, what people think is like just not one way or the other, or it counts as no. And again, Wisconsin is not using Robert's rules in the normal way that other states would use it, both at the county level and then in a different way at the state level.
And committee chairs can decide their own rules.
Yeah.
So there's there could be so many layers of variance.
On Wednesdays, we wear pink and abstain. And
yeah.
I don't know, it's weird. Yeah.
Take a while to get used to know which committee you're walking into. Yeah. Okay, so before we get to our last, most important part, community questions, anything else at the Capitol we should be keeping our eye on?
I don't even know where to start. There's a ton of really terrible legislation coming down, but hopefully we'll be able to flag stuff that is both terrible and needs action.
True. We are getting pretty set up in launching our newsletters. So
I was going to ask where people could keep up on you guys.
Correct. So in that, we will likely do some regular updates from the caucus on bills. I think that'll be the best way for us to share out, like, hey, what's coming up, and when our public testimonies on things, because folks commonly ask, like, can you let us know when bad bills are coming up or good bills are coming up, and we can publicly testify. That good part rarely happens, but we want to be able to have make the Capitol and what the happenings of the Capitol as accessible as possible for folks. And that's one way we hope to do that. We'll make sure that we get you the link to the sign up form that just went live yesterday. And then
social media too is really a quick way to get it. Also, shout out to Amelia for making sure that we're kind of doing a better job of documenting all the stuff that we do. Because that can get overwhelming, and she is amazing at that. So we have Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, the top 3 there.
All the age groups.
Exactly right. and MySpace as well, and CompuServe.
No.
Don't forget your Blink account.
Right.
4chan. Kind of an odd question, but do you guys have a voice that you're trying to project in these newsletters? A way of talking or communicating that you ideal way you want to represent yourself, or
spicy righteous anger
in Shakespearean English. For the haters,
for the
thou and doff,
for the groundlings.
No,
I don't know. I always just find it fascinating, like how you guys find your voices of communicating with the public.
I look at myself in the mirror and I say, Peter picked a pickle peppers daily, and I find my voice. I'm just kidding. But
I try to speak really plainly, right, and to point out what is wrong. I'm looking forward to pivoting soon to be able to put out a lot of our own legislation, because we have piles and piles of ideas that are based not from ALEC legislation or terrible think tanks, but based in what will make things better and in actually speaking with stakeholders and people closest to these problems. And I'm looking forward to pivoting from being defensive about the terrible stuff that's coming through into putting out our own compelling vision of how we can make things better.
True. In my actual sense, right? I always think about, framing things from in this way, acknowledging the problem, finding who's affected by that problem, and then giving folks an actual tangible solution. That's what I try and do in the emails that I get from folks and phone calls that I get from folks. Like, for example, got a call from a former resident who has been impacted by the system. There's folks who have been actively working on an expungement bill, and it might see some traction this session. He wanted to know if he had access, if this bill passed, if he would qualify for expungement. And we did the research. We called around. We asked folks, and we were able to tell him that he did. If this happens, and he'd have the opportunity to reclaim his life.
How do you take that news?
Man, it was everything. I mean, to be able to give, with all the bad news that, we consistently have to talk about, to give, one person good news is a gift.
The bet. All right, community questions. You guys are on the hot seat. Here we go. Got the hard ones that we saved from last time.
Oh, nice.
But we'll leave those for a little bit later. Tish asks you, what's the best use of my time if I want to make the world a better place?
It all depends on your purpose, right? And finding that, like, how you use your talents to help others.
Kind of where you fit in.
Yep, exactly. So with me, I know I'm a great connector. I literally got a call this morning. Wanted to know how to get support around hosting a event. And the organization that they worked for didn't have resources, right, to host this event. I literally was like, well, you can talk to this person, that person. If you partner with, this group, they might be able to provide monetary resources. If you partner with this group, they can definitely get you a space. This group can help increase the amount of folks who show up to this event, and so on. I've always been really good at that because I love building relationships, understanding the work that folks do, and then also just actively listening. So I leverage that in whatever body of work that I do, to be the most effective that I can be.
When did you realize that about yourself?
No, 17.
You're 17. That's pretty
17.
young. Good for you.
And it's been a huge gift every time.
I would say do the research. So if you want to make something better, if you want to make the world a better place, like, do the research and then go listen to people. And don't jump into whatever you're trying to do with a solution that you think is going to be the best. Just be really agile with that. And then go do more research and then talk to more people and then change the solution based on what you hear and what you find out. And that gets us to better places. And be obsessed with it, right? So all the things that I've gotten done, and I mean, even passed in terms of legislation, I was consumed by. And my friends heard about them, and my kids heard about them ad nauseum. But don't be afraid to jump in with both feet and get obsessed.
And you think being obsessed goes in with Darren's passion, where when you're passionate about it, you found your purpose. You
Absolutely.
don't mind going all in.
Yeah. And even if you very narrowly win or lose that specific fight, like, that process and the listening makes you better at the next one.
True.
Learn the whole way down. All right, a little bit easier one. Eddie asks, who's better at pinball? We saw Darren starting to play.
Let the record show that Darren is pointing at me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give him that. Ryan is far better at pinball than me.
He owns an arcade.
But I will beat him one day. And when I do, Eddie, I'll let you know.
And win or lose, you get better when you play.
Exactly.
Sort of like politics.
Exactly. I mean, if we go back to the previous question, hone your talents. build the skill,
Purpose is
become the
pinball.
master, crush your enemies.
Yeah. And like pinball and politics, there's a saying in pinball, like it only takes one ball, which is kind of cool.
One ball, that's all.
One ball, that's all. That's really, I need a one ball, that's all shirt.
I'll get that base later.
Please do. That's fine. And it's, like you get generally, traditionally 3 balls during one game of pinball, and you can totally fuck up the first 2 and then still have a really good game.
When I tell you I clutched in that first tournament
Yep.
on Monster Bash, clutched around 2 balls, huge mess up, was far behind the rest of the team. Well, not the rest of the team, the rest of the competition, and I came back and I won the round. Ended up placing 32 in my first tournament on that third ball.
Solid.
No big deal.
I'm just saying, I counted it as a huge win. I mean, it was, I believe, 58 folks there to get 32.
Half of them were 15. Yeah.
They were all
I'm
grown
just
folks.
kidding,
I'm just saying.
All right. My grandma asks, do you guys have God in your lives? This was the hard one from last time.
You want to go first?
No.
I'm happy to go first. So I believe in people, and I believe in the capacity of people to do good. I believe that there is no God.
Love it.
I believe in God. This is one of the first fights we've ever had. But that's okay. I hate Ryan nonetheless. I'm just playing. Ryan's my home slice. But yeah, I believe in God. I think having a vision of something beyond yourself that you can believe in. And this probably feeds into Ryan's ideology.
Because I was going to say people.
Because I believe in the God that is in all of us, right? And that still functions in tandem with religious beliefs too, right? Despite the atrocities of Christianity, I fall in the spectrum of it. Though it's not in the same traditional values as most other folks.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think regardless of a person's answer to that question, I'm more interested in why, rather than the yes or no of, is God in your life? I guess, I would much rather answer the question. I think I did. I think Darren did of why or why not is God in your life?
And I think
we had a similar answer there.
I think the real question she's asking is what's guiding you, what grounds you, and what informs your judgments. Yeah.
My fists.
All right, 2 more. Darnell asks, you guys will like this one, why do politicians suck so much?
I don't know. They do, though. I try not to refer to myself as a politician. I try to refer to myself as an elected
representative.
An activist or organizer who happens to have been elected. But man, no, we suck. Like the standard for being an elected representative or a politician is so low, and there's 2 different jobs you get when you get this job. One is being a legislator and hopefully putting forward good things and like trying to do the right thing. And the other one is the politics, where it's about, I guess if you put it charitably, like relationship building.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I thrive.
I don't like that one. I don't like people.
So I mean, so the thing is, I think I disagree in Ryan's framing of that second piece.
Which part?
He said it's about the relationship building. That is a part of the job, but the politics of it all is the egos in the mix, not the relationship itself. I think there is a lot of things that you gather through relational organizing with other folks. I mean, it's the foundation of organizing itself, right? Understanding for the folks is why, and figuring out how you can feed that why into a broader movement, right?
You can give that action and purpose.
In the egos piece of it, it's like who gets to claim something as a victory, and how does it lead them towards something more power, more control, more unanimous decision making, right? That's the ego, and I think that's why people suck. in this way.
That's a much better answer. I'm going to concur with Darren's instead of my own. But I'm glad that we both came to the same conclusion that people are bad.
Yeah.
Just to point out with everybody, Ryan did just agree with the politicians, so take it for what it's worth.
Organizer who happens to have been alive.
Exactly. Last question is from Allie. What do you guys have hanging in your office?
That's such a. Did he put you up to this?
That's hilarious.
No.
I can tell you what I do have hanging in my office as I lean closer into the mic, because Ryan doesn't have one yet. I have this amazing, okay, map of my district that includes so many things. All the neighborhoods, all the neighborhoods in my district. All the municipalities.
Darren is doing this because I had a really great idea to like put neighborhoods and actually bars and schools and all these things on my map. And then Darren stole that idea and he got his first. So this is a very petty rivalry now.
I'm just
and
saying.
one that he's winning, and I'm mad.
I'm just saying he gets pinball. I get other things.
Good office
Nice
decorations. Yeah.
And I also have some other things in my office, unlike Ryan. I had some really dope pieces of art that were donated to the office of the 10th district.
That's lovely.
By dope artist Tom Ports. And I also have just a bunch of things, folks. You just got to come on down. Come on down to 21 North and the Capitol and catch the vibes, because our office is beautiful. And it is our office, right? Because it's the people's office, but also me and Ryan share an office. So what's hanging on my walls is technically hanging on his. So we both have maps.
Yeah, Ryan's got a map.
I'm going to come steal the map of Darren's district and liberate it. No, and it's I should say John Fleissner has promised me some of his amazing art. You might recall his art from the site of the MTEA building. There's an amazing mural there. He does just awesome like wood carving, block art, and a lot of protest
so much
stuff.
cooler than mine.
It's gonna be dope. So, John, I gotta get that from you soon, one of these days.
John, don't do it. Don't bring him art, because it's gonna look better than mine. Bring me art first. I'm just kidding.
But I also have a very small picture of my family. It's like the only thing on my wall, and it looks very cavernous, and my family looks small relative to it. The offices are big. They're like big, imposing, you know.
I was talking to Amelia on the last episode. That building is so impressive.
It
like
is.
grandeur makes you feel some type of way when you
Yeah.
walk in.
Did you see the governor's press room?
Oh, it is.
That
opulent,
place is
right?
beautiful.
And
Like that
yeah.
ceiling?
Yeah,
My
yeah.
God.
And I hope that at some point our behavior as a legislator and as a government can live up to that opulence and grandeur, and that we can do the people's business better than we do now, because now it's pretty dysfunctional.
In Ryan's words, it's very poo-poo doo-doo. As he tells me daily. He doesn't say that. I say that.
2 poop emojis sent to Darren mid-meeting.
That's the gravitas and the weight of the office that we're trying to put out onto social media. It's poo-poo doo-doo.
That's the voice you're trying to find.
Exactly.
Appreciate it. All right, well, we'll let you guys go. Thank you for the community questions. Anything you want to say before we sign off?
Thanks, Will. This is great. It is so great to have a forum like this where we can just kind of unpack things. It makes me feel better and gives me some closure on the stuff that we're doing as we do it. And thanks for giving that a voice.
You're welcome.
And like Ryan said earlier in this conversation, everything can come down to one moment. One ball. That's all.
Title of the episode.
Perfect.
Ryan's one ball is all.
Well, we should probably work on phrasing there, but yeah, we get the idea.
Thanks so much for listening, everybody. And until next time, take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you next time.
Please please call the episode Ryan's One Ball. That'll be fantastic. I'm sure the filters will pick that up.
You're in committee meeting and Ryan one ball. He's up.
That's fantastic.